James Calloway sat alone in sub-basement level 2 of the Windsor Castle Royal Archive at 11:04 p.m., and the verification stamp on the desk beside him had not moved in 40 minutes. It was a small stamp, brass handle worn smooth from 12 years of daily use. He had pressed it thousands of times without hesitation. Lease extensions, letters patent, ceremonial appointments, grant confirmations. The work of a senior document verification officer was not glamorous, but it was precise, and precision was something Calloway understood in his bones. Tonight, the stamp stayed where it was. The document in front of him, Royal Decree Reference 2019 LG 447, authorizing the transfer of land tenure rights over 1,840 acres of Crown Estate land in Berkshire to a private development trust, had every visible marking of authenticity. The paper stock was correct. The formatting matched the 2019 template. The reference number fell in proper sequence. The seal impression was clean. But the original signature record did not exist. Not misfiled, not pending cross-reference, not held in a separate departmental folder awaiting consolidation. He had checked every possibility twice, then 3 times over the past 3 days. The signature verification log for Decree 2019 LG 447, the physical record confirming that an authorized signatory had reviewed and approved the document before it entered the official registry, was simply not there. A decree without a verified signature record was not a decree, it was paper. And yet someone, several someones, working above his pay grade and beyond his clearance, wanted him to stamp it verified by 9 a.m. tomorrow, clearing the path for a £340 million land transfer to complete within the week. Calloway looked at the stamp, looked at the document, looked at the gap in the archive shelf where the signature log should have been sitting for the past 5 years. He had been a verification officer for 12 years. He had never once stamped something he could not verify. He was not going to start tonight. But first, he needed to understand what exactly he was looking at, and for that, he needed to go back to the beginning. The assignment had arrived on a Tuesday, 3 days earlier, in the form of a standard blue folder dropped on his desk by the departmental courier at 8:45 a.m. Priority verification request. Deadline, Friday 900. Authorizing officer, Sir Edmund Hargrove, Keeper of Records, Royal Household. Calloway had noted the timeline, 3 days for what should have been a routine cross-reference, and opened the folder without particular concern. Decree verifications came through regularly when large estate matters were being finalized. The lawyers needed the archive stamp before the money moved. Standard procedure. He had pulled the document itself first. 2019 LG 447. Read through it methodically. Land tenure transfer, Crown Estate Berkshire parcel, grantee listed as Halcyon Development Trust. He had noted the date, March 14, 2019, and moved to step 1 of the verification protocol. Locate the original signature record. The signature log for 2019 land grants lived in Archive Section 7, Cabinet Row C, organized chronologically. Calloway had walked down there himself rather than sending a request up to the retrieval team. He preferred doing it himself when deadlines were tight, less room for delay. He had found the 2019 log binders, found March, found the 13th, found the 15th. The 14th was not there. He had checked again. The binders ran continuously, each day's signature approvals logged in sequence, initialed by the duty registrar, cross-stamped by the department supervisor. March 13 ended at entry 22. March 15 began at entry 1. There was no March 14 volume. Calloway had stood in the archive aisle for a moment, then done what any methodical person does when something is missing. He checked whether it had been misfiled. He pulled March 13 again, checked whether the 14th had been accidentally bound into the wrong volume. He checked March of 2018 and 2020 in case a misfiling had been compounded by another misfiling. Nothing. He had gone back to his desk and submitted a formal retrieval query through the system, flagging the gap and requesting a records trace. Standard process for missing documents. The system acknowledged his query and assigned it a reference number. By end of day Tuesday, no response. He had followed up Wednesday morning. The retrieval system showed his query as received and pending assignment to a records officer. He had called the retrieval desk directly. The officer who answered told him queries were running 3 to 4 days behind due to a backlog of year-end audit requests. Calloway had explained that he had a Friday 9 a.m. deadline. The officer had told him she would flag it as priority. Wednesday afternoon, still nothing. He had decided to try escalating. His direct supervisor, Deputy Verification Officer Patricia Henley, he was informed by her assistant at a dental appointment that had apparently expanded into a procedure requiring 2 days of recovery. The assistant did not know when she would return. He had tried the next level up. Deputy Keeper of Records Robert Finch. Finch's office told him Robert was on compassionate leave, a family matter, no return date confirmed. He had tried the level above that. Sir Edmund Hargrove's office, the man who had signed the priority request himself. Hargrove's personal assistant, a composed woman named Claire, had told him that Sir Edmund was in meetings all day Wednesday. Calloway had asked whether he could book 15 minutes between meetings. Claire had told him Sir Edmund's schedule was completely committed. Thursday morning, Calloway had called Hargrove's office again. Claire had informed him with the same composed professionalism that Sir Edmund was in meetings all day Thursday. Calloway had sat at his desk for a while after that second call, looking at the blue folder, thinking about the particular architecture of the situation. His supervisor, unavailable. The deputy keeper, unavailable. The keeper of records himself, who had personally signed the priority request, unavailable now for 2 consecutive full days, while Calloway was expected to produce a verified stamp by 9 a.m. Friday. The unavailability was too clean, too consistent, too perfectly distributed across exactly the people who would normally receive an escalation about a missing signature record on a document Hargrove had personally prioritized. Calloway had picked up the folder again and gone back to the archive. He had spent Thursday doing what the verification system was apparently not going to do for him. He pulled every adjacent record he could access without triggering a higher clearance flag. The correspondence file for Halcyon Development Trust's initial application. The Crown Estate review documents from early 2019. The interdepartmental routing slips that would have traveled with Decree 2019 LG 447 as it moved through the approval chain. The routing slips were illuminating. Each document moving through the Palace administrative system collected stamps as it traveled, received, reviewed, approved, registered. The routing slip for 2019 LG 447 showed the document had passed through 4 departments before reaching the registry. 3 of the 4 stamps were present. The 4th, the Records Verification Department stamp, which would have been applied when the signature log was formally completed and filed, was represented by a blank square. Not a smudged stamp, not a faded impression, a blank square. Someone had routed the document around the verification step. Or, more precisely, someone had allowed the document to continue moving through the system as though that step had occurred, when it had not. Calloway had photographed the routing slip with his work phone, documented the blank square, written a precise note in his personal log. He kept a handwritten log, always, every day, a habit from his first week in the department when his supervisor at the time had told him that electronic systems fail and paper does not. He had then pulled the index of all documents processed through the Records Verification Department in March 2019, looking for who had been on duty as registrar for the 14th. The index showed a name he did not recognize, T. Osai, duty registrar, March 2019, no longer listed as current staff. He had gone to the HR directory, found the full name, Margaret Osai, status, retired June 2019. Contact information not listed in the current directory as was standard for retired staff. He had spent 20 minutes on the phone with the HR department, navigating a conversation with a very helpful but very process-oriented administrator who explained that providing personal contact information for retired staff required a formal data request that typically took 5 to 7 business days. Calloway had thanked her, hung up, and tried a different approach. Margaret Osai had worked in the department. She would have had a staff file. Staff files listed next of kin information and emergency contacts, which, in cases of retirement rather than emergency, sometimes included personal phone numbers the staff member had voluntarily provided for the purposes of pension correspondence. It took another 30 minutes and a politely worded written request to a different administrator, one who seemed to understand that Calloway was not asking for anything improper, to get a single phone number listed under Margaret Osai's pension correspondence file. He had called it at 4:30 p.m. Thursday. She had answered on the third ring. Her voice was steady and clear for someone he had just surprised with a call from her former employer. Margaret Osai. Yes, she had worked in the records verification department. Yes, she had been the duty registrar for March 2019. She remembered that period well. She had retired 3 months later, and the last quarter had been busy. Calloway had introduced himself carefully, explained that he was a verification officer working on a document from March 2019 and had encountered a gap in the signature log for the 14th. He kept his language neutral. Gap. Discrepancy. He did not use the word fraud. He did not know yet whether he had the right to use it. There had been a pause on the line. You said March 14, 2019. Yes. Another pause, longer. I remember that day, she had said. There was a land grant decree. The instructions came down from the department head's office, Hargrove's office, saying the decree had received verbal authorization pending formal signature, and that we should proceed with registry filing and complete the signature log when the formal signature arrived, which was unusual. We didn't normally file ahead of signature completion, but the instruction came from his office directly, in writing. Did the formal signature ever arrive? Calloway had asked. Not before I retired, she had said, 3 months later. And the instruction from Hargrove's office, do you still have it? A pause that felt different from the others, more considered. Mr. Calloway, she had said, I kept index cards. My whole career, every document I processed, I wrote an index card. Date, reference number, any instructions that came with it, who authorized the filing instructions. It was never official. My supervisor used to tease me about it, but I kept them because I am a thorough person and I did not trust that electronic systems would preserve the details. His throat had tightened. You kept index cards for March 2019. I kept index cards for 31 years, she had said. I have them in 4 shoeboxes in my spare room. Give me the reference number. He had given it to her, heard her put the phone down, heard distantly the sound of a box being moved, paper being sorted through, then her footsteps returning. 2019 LG 447, she had read. March 14, 2019. Registry filing authorized by instruction from Sir Edmund Hargrove's office. Written authorization signed by his personal assistant, Claire Whitfield. Note: signature log to be completed upon receipt of formal signatory confirmation. Confirmation never received prior to my departure. I flagged it in my handover notes to my replacement. Her handover notes. He had asked whether those would be in the archive. They should be, she had said. Whether they are is a different question. They were not, he had checked. Could I ask you something, Ms. Osai? He had kept his voice level. Do you still have the index card? I have the index card. Would you be willing to bring it in, or allow me to collect it from you? I think it may be important. The pause this time had been the longest of all. Then, how important? Important enough that I am going to be making a phone call tonight that will end either my career or someone else's," he had said. "And your card may be the difference between those two outcomes." She had agreed to come in Friday morning, early, before 9 a.m. He had thanked her, hung up, and sat at his desk for a long time. Then he had gone back to the archive, sub-basement level 2, the vault where the physical decree sat in its folder, waiting for his stamp. He had pulled it out, put it on the desk, put the stamp beside it, and begun the process of deciding what to do next. That was 40 minutes ago. Now he picked up his phone. He had a contact list on his work phone that he had never expected to use. It had been given to him during his security induction, 12 years ago, a page of numbers representing escalation contacts beyond the normal departmental chain. Emergency reference only. The language around them had been vague in a way that Calloway, at the time, had found mildly bureaucratic. Now he understood the vagueness was intentional. One of the numbers was listed as Legal Counsel, Private Office, H.M. the King. Calloway looked at it for a moment. He was a senior document verification officer. He stamped things. He did not call private legal counsel to the monarch. He called the number. It rang 4 times. Then a man's voice, alert despite the hour. "This is Prentice." "Mr. Prentice, my name is James Calloway. I am a senior document verification officer at the Royal Archive, Windsor. I apologize for the hour. I need to report a serious discrepancy in a document I have been asked to verify by 9 a.m. tomorrow, and I have reason to believe the discrepancy is not accidental." A beat of silence. What kind of discrepancy? "A missing signature verification record on a royal decree authorizing a £340 million land transfer. I also have evidence that the document was deliberately routed around the verification step in 2019 on written instruction from the current keeper of records." The silence on the other end was different from the silence he had encountered all week. It was not the silence of unavailability. It was the silence of someone fully awake and recalibrating quickly. "You're in the archive now." "Sub-basement level 2, yes." "Do not stamp that document. Do not leave the building. I will be there within the hour." Calloway set the phone down, looked at the stamp. For the first time in 40 minutes, he felt the tightness in his shoulders begin to ease slightly. He had not stamped it. He was not going to. He opened his handwritten log to a fresh page and began writing. Everything. The timeline precise. The conversations verbatim as he could recall them. The routing slip, the blank square, the 3 days of unavailability, Margaret Osai's index card details, the phone call just completed. He wrote in small, clear handwriting with a pen that would not smudge, because his first supervisor had taught him that documentation was only as useful as it was legible. He wrote for 50 minutes. Prentice arrived in 53. He was not alone. With him came a woman Calloway did not recognize, late 40s, calm in a way that suggested professional training, a leather folder under her arm. And behind her, 2 men in plain clothes who presented Metropolitan Police identification without being asked. "Detective Inspector Reeves," said the woman. "Serious Fraud Office. We were already aware of Halcyon Development Trust." She said it without drama, as though confirming a weather forecast. "Your call gave us the internal component we were missing." They had set up at the archive table. Prentice had reviewed the decree, the routing slip, Calloway's documented log, and the signature gap. Reeves had asked precise, short questions. She did not ask the same question twice. Her 2 colleagues had moved through the vault quietly, identifying and photographing additional documents, working from a list Calloway had not seen before. At 1:15 a.m., Prentice made a call. Calloway heard only one side of it. Brief, definitive, "Yes, sir, tonight. I think that's necessary. We'll need him present." He hung up, looked at Reeves. "Hargrove will be here at 8 a.m. Can you have what you need ready by then?" "I already have what I need," she said, "but yes." Calloway had gone home at 2 a.m., slept 3 hours, returned at 6 a.m. to meet Margaret Osei in the staff entrance lobby. She was 74 years old, precisely dressed, and she carried a small Ziploc plastic bag containing a single index card as though it were a court exhibit, which it was shortly going to become. The card was 4 by 6 inches, handwritten in neat blue ink. Reference number, date, filing instruction, authorization source, Sir Edmund Hargrove's office, written authorization signed by Claire Whitfield. Notation at the bottom in Margaret's careful hand, formal signature confirmation outstanding at time of processing, flagged in handover notes ref. MO2019 handover 14. She had held it out to Calloway. He had not taken it immediately. "I want you to understand what this is going to be used for," he had said. She had looked at him steadily. "Mr. Calloway, I kept that card for 5 years. I kept it because I knew. The day I processed that filing that something was wrong, I retired and I told myself it was no longer my problem." She had paused. "I should not have done that. Take the card." He had taken it. At 8 a.m., Sir Edmund Hargrove walked into the sub-basement level 2 vault in the same way he presumably walked into every room, with the settled authority of a man who had occupied senior positions for so long that authority had become physical posture. He was 63, silver-haired, well-tailored even at this hour. He stopped when he saw the room. Calloway standing near the document table, Prentice from the King's private legal office, Reeves from the Serious Fraud Office, 2 additional officers, and seated in a chair to the side Margaret Osei, who looked at Hargrove with an expression that contained no surprise whatsoever. Hargrove's posture did not change visibly. His eyes moved across the room once, professionally cataloging. Then he settled on Prentice. "Richard, this is unusual." "Sit down, Edmund." Prentice's voice was quiet. The authority in it came from somewhere other than volume. Hargrove sat. He looked at Calloway. "Calloway, isn't it? Verification officer. I asked for a stamp on a time-sensitive document. Why am I in a room with fraud officers at 8 in the morning?" "Because the document cannot be stamped," Calloway said. "There is no original signature verification record for Decree 2019 LG 447. Records go missing. Administrative gaps happen." Hargrove's voice was even, patient. "That's why we have reconstruction procedures. I would have thought a verification officer of your experience would know to apply the reconstruction protocol rather than." "The record didn't go missing," Calloway said. He kept his voice the same temperature as Hargrove's. "The document was deliberately routed around the verification step in March 2019. The routing slip shows a blank where the verification stamp should be. The March 14th signature log volume does not exist. The handover notes flagging this as outstanding were not preserved." "Administrative error," Hargrove said, "possibly compounded. These things happen over years." Reeves placed a document on the table. The routing slip photographed and printed. She placed a second document beside it. Calloway's timeline precise. Hargrove looked at them without touching them. "The written instruction to proceed with registry filing before signature confirmation," Reeves said, "came from your office. Signed by your personal assistant, Claire Whitfield, on your authority. Do you dispute that?" "I would need to see the instruction you're referring to." Reeves placed Margaret Osei's index card on the table, in its plastic evidence sleeve now. Hargrove's eyes went to it. He looked at it for longer than he had looked at anything else. Something changed in the room, not dramatically. The temperature didn't drop. No one raised a voice, but the particular quality of Hargrove's composure shifted, the way ice shifts before it cracks, not visible yet, but different underneath. "That," he said carefully, "is not an official record." "No," Reeves agreed. "It's a personal record kept by the duty registrar who processed the filing, Margaret Osei, who is sitting to your left." Hargrove turned to look at Margaret. Margaret looked back at him. Neither of them said anything. But Calloway watched Hargrove's jaw tighten, and he understood in that moment that Hargrove had not known she still had it. Had perhaps assumed over 5 years that she was gone and her personal habits were gone with her. "I would like to speak with my solicitor," Hargrove said. "Of course," Reeves said. She nodded to one of the officers. "Sir Edmund Hargrove, I am detaining you for questioning under the Fraud Act 2006, Sections 2 and 4, fraud by false representation and fraud by abuse of position. You will be transported to—" "This is a misunderstanding," Hargrove said. His voice had not risen, but something underneath it had cracked open. "I have served this institution for 22 years. Whatever Calloway thinks he's found, there is context he doesn't have. The land transfer was authorized at a level above my department. I was following instructions," Prentice said quietly. "From whom?" Hargrove stopped. "Because if you were following instructions," Prentice continued, "now is the time to say so. And to say from whom. That is the only conversation that might change your situation this morning." Hargrove looked at the decree on the table, at the routing slip, at Margaret's index card in its plastic sleeve, at Calloway, who had spent 3 days and 1 sleepless night building the architecture of this moment out of nothing more than a missing binder and a refusal to stamp something he could not verify. He looked down at the table. The composure did not shatter. Men like Hargrove do not shatter. But it settled, like a structure accepting that it can no longer hold its own weight. He gave a name. The name was not Hargrove's alone to carry. The investigation that followed moved quickly once the Serious Fraud Office had the internal documentation, Margaret's index card, and Hargrove's statement. The land transfer was frozen within 48 hours. Halcyon Development Trust was examined. Its beneficial ownership structure, layered through 3 holding companies, eventually resolved to a private individual with a 20-year relationship to the palace administrative structure and a financial interest in the Berkshire land that predated the 2019 decree by 6 years. The audit that followed was not small. Reeves's team, working with archive staff under new interim management, identified 3 additional decrees over an 11-year period where the verification step had been similarly managed, either routed around or completed by a registrar working from instructions that contradicted standard protocol. 2 of the 3 involved land or property rights. One involved a grant of ceremonial appointment that had commercial implications Calloway did not fully understand and was not cleared to inquire about. Each of the 3 had passed through Hargrove's department. Each had been processed during periods when the duty registrar had subsequently retired, transferred, or in one case died. Margaret Osai's index cards covered 2 of the 3. She brought all 4 shoeboxes in on the 3rd day of the audit, set them on the archive table with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been waiting for this for 5 years without quite admitting it to themselves. Reeves's team spent 4 days going through them. Hargrove was charged formally, fraud by abuse of position, 2 counts of misconduct in public office. He pleaded not guilty at first appearance, which surprised no one. The evidence, Reeves told Calloway in a brief and professional update call 3 weeks later, was sufficient for conviction without his cooperation. But his eventual cooperation, the name, the chain, the records of instruction he had retained privately, and which his solicitor ultimately determined were more useful as mitigation than as protection, would make the case faster and cleaner. He changed his plea. The sentencing, 8 months later, resulted in 4 years custodial, reduced for cooperation and previously good character. The individual named in Hargrove's statement received a separate, longer sentence. Halcyon Development Trust was dissolved. The Berkshire land remained Crown Estate. 3 weeks after the arrest, Calloway received a message through Prentice's office. A brief meeting was requested. Private office, Windsor. No detail given beyond that. He had arrived expecting paperwork, a debrief, perhaps, or a security review of his conduct in bypassing departmental protocol. He had prepared a clear account of his reasoning, the unavailability pattern, the escalating evidence, the 9 a.m. deadline, and was ready to defend each decision with documented justification. Instead, Prentice had met him in a small, quiet room off the main corridor and handed him an envelope. "Letter of commendation," Prentice said, "goes into your permanent personnel file. The language is specific about the nature of what you did and why it was correct." Calloway opened it, official letterhead, precise, formal language, documented assessment of his conduct, recommendation for advancement consideration, a note at the bottom, handwritten, that he read twice. "A verification officer who refuses to verify what cannot be verified is not obstructing the institution. He is the institution." "There will not be public recognition," Prentice said. "The details of the case touch matters that need to remain outside public record for the time being. But this letter means your career is not only undamaged, it is formally marked as exemplary. When opportunities arise, this will be part of how you are considered." Calloway had looked at the letter for a moment, then looked up. "What about Margaret Osei?" Prentice had almost smiled. "We were hoping you'd ask." Margaret Osei's index cards, all 4 shoeboxes, 31 years of meticulous personal record-keeping that had never been asked for and never been official, were formally donated to the Royal Archive under her name. A cataloging note in the new digital system, accessible to future verification officers, recorded their provenance. Personal records maintained voluntarily by Duty Registrar M. Osei, 1988 to 2019, as supplementary reference material. A small thing, a cataloging note, but it meant that every future officer who encountered a gap in the formal record would now be directed, as a matter of archive protocol, to check Osei's supplementary index first. Margaret had been told about this in a phone call from Calloway, who had been the one to request it. She had been quiet for a moment after he explained. 31 years, she had said finally. "I used to worry that no one would ever care about those cards." "Someone cared," he had said. 6 months after the arrest, Calloway was on routine duty in the archive, morning retrieval requests, standard verification work, the ordinary rhythm of the job, when he received an email from the new interim keeper of records. New safeguarding protocols for decree verification. Mandatory dual registrar sign-off on all land and property grant documents. No registry filing to proceed ahead of completed signature verification, under any circumstances, regardless of instruction level. A new escalation line, independent of departmental hierarchy, available to any verification officer who encountered a discrepancy they could not resolve through normal channels. Attached to the email was a brief note. The protocol changes were being attributed, in the internal record, to the identification of systemic weaknesses during the 2024 archive audit. No names, no drama. But the protocols were there, and they would remain built into the process now, structurally, so that the next Hargrove, if there was one, would find it considerably harder to route a document around the one person whose job it was to ask whether everything was exactly as it should be. Calloway printed the email, added it to his handwritten log, wrote a single line beneath it. "This is why you write things down." 8 months later, a formal review board confirmed his advancement to principal verification officer. He moved to a larger desk. The brass stamp moved with him. He used it every day without hesitation. Except once when he couldn't, and that, it turned out, had been enough. Real duty is not about processing. It is not about meeting deadlines or satisfying the person above you in the chain who has signed a priority request and is now, conveniently, unavailable. Real duty is the willingness to sit in a basement vault at 11 o'clock at night with a stamp you will not press, a phone call you are not sure you are entitled to make, and the quiet, stubborn knowledge that you cannot verify what is not there. James Calloway made that choice on a Thursday night in a Windsor archive, surrounded by 30 years of other people's paperwork. He did not make it dramatically. He did not announce it. He simply sat with the stamp on the desk beside the document and refused to move one toward the other until he understood what he was actually being asked to authorize. That refusal, quiet, professional, absolute, stopped a £340 million fraud, exposed 11 years of systematic document manipulation, and changed the internal protocols of an institution that had been operating on the assumption that its own people would always choose the easier path. Most of them do. That is how systems like this persist. Calloway chose the harder one, and because he did, the next person who sits in sub-basement level 2 with something that doesn't add up will find, already built into their procedure, the instruction to stop, to question, and to escalate, because one man once did exactly that, and the institution, however slowly, however quietly, learned from it. That is what it means to protect the record. Not to stamp it, to protect it.